Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to today's webinar on streamlining the subcontractor payment process with GC Pay. Our presenters today are Marshall Baranek from Sage Software and Sabrina Katz from GC Pay. Just a few notes before we get started. Everyone is muted for a clean listening experience. If you have questions, please type them into the questions box and we will address them throughout the session. For the best visual experience, please maximize your screen. This webinar will be recorded and the link will be emailed out to everyone later today. I will now turn it over to you, Sabrina.
Thanks, Krista, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to show you GC Pay's integration with Sage 300 CRE and Sage 100 Contractor to show you how it can really help your team streamline the entire subcontractor pay app process. Just quickly to go over today's agenda, we're going to go over, what is GC Pay. We'll go over, why GC Pay could help your organization. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague Marshall for a live demo of the platform. We'll go over any of your burning questions that you post in that questions chat box. And then we'll go over the free lunch that we'll be sending everyone. Thank you to Grubhub after. Krista already nicely introduced us, but today we'll have Marshall from Sage, and then I am actually from GC Pay on the channel sales side as well. I think Krista already went over this as well, but just some housekeeping items. Mute for clean listening experience, put your questions in the question section, and definitely maximize your screen, especially when Marshall is presenting his side of the demo, because I want to make sure everyone can really see the functions from the general contractor side. He'll also be showing some great tools and functionality from the subcontractor side as well. So for those of you who have not yet heard of GC Pay, it is a cloud-based platform for managing the subcontractor pay application process. I love GC Pay's founding story because right around 2003, there was a construction auditor who happened to be our founder, and his job was to go in and audit commercial general contracting businesses. And after doing this for a few years of the paper chasing process, paper pay apps back and forth with lien waivers just was such a mess, he's like, there has to be a better way than this manual way that my clients are handling the pay app process. Luckily for him, his brother-in-law was a software engineer, so they teamed up in 2003 to create GC Pay really just for their customers that they were auditing. But then quickly, one general contractor talked to another and it spread like wildfire. Everyone saying, yes, we also would like to, better automate and streamline our pay app process. So, fast forward 17 years now, we have over 45,000 companies on the platform. Last year, we did a little under $3 billion in contracts, and we currently are managing projects in all 50 states plus Canada. So maybe this, is sounding interesting to you. It could be something that your team has been thinking about. Yeah, we do deal with a lot of back and forth communication with subs. We still do, email in pay apps, and lien waivers are a mess. So really, how could GC Pay help us? There are 5 or 6 key areas that the platform eliminates these major issues with the pay app process. So the first thing is subcontractor billing errors. So you might be thinking to your current process. So if you ever deal with subs overbilling line items, overbilling contracts, having math mistakes with the percentage to dollar conversions, anything like that, GC Pay will completely eliminate any possibility for a sub to overbill line items, contracts, or have any sort of math mistakes. Marshall will definitely show this in the demo, but if that's something that your team struggles with, definitely, keep change. Next is missing lien waivers. So if you're thinking back to your current process right now, and your team is the one that has to, create those lien waivers for each project or sub or state or anything like that, or if you're having the subs create the lien waivers and they send it back to you with issues, that's one part. The other is if, let's say you ask for a conditional come along with the pay app, but half the time the subcontractor doesn't actually attach the waiver you need when you need it. GC Pay will ensure that you never again have to deal with missing lien waivers. And since your custom lien waiver is generated automatically in the platform every single time, there's no need for you to create the lien waivers, worry about any errors on it. They're perfect every single time, which Marshall will go over. The next piece is that unapproved change orders. If you're thinking about your current process and, subcontractors sometimes accidentally sneak in change orders that one haven't been approved or aren't even, part of the contract yet, and you have to have internal processes to manually, have someone physically making sure that the two line up. GC Pay will eliminate any possibility for subcontractors to bill for unapproved change orders. This is where our direct API integration with Sage 300 CRE and Sage 100 Contractor really come into play. So stay tuned, Marshall will show that whole part. But if you ever deal with issues with change order management, definitely stay tuned for what GC Pay has in store. The next piece is outdated compliance. If you're thinking about your current process right now and you're tracking, compliance, someone in your office is tracking compliance via Excel, and it's, up to the person to let the subcontractor know when their insurance is expiring, and they're always having to chase down insurance, manually make sure that you don't accidentally pay if insurance is expired. GC Pay will streamline that entire compliance process. Again, this is where our direct API integration with Sage 300 CRE and Sage 100 Contractor really come into play, because we will pull over your subcontractor insurance requirements straight from that Sage module. And we can automatically notify subs when it's about to expire. You can stop subs from billing if they haven't, sent in their updated insurance. There's a lot of great functionality when it comes around compliance. The last two pieces is that hand keying or double entry into Sage. Right now, if someone in your team at the end is actually having to type in and hand key that approved pay app data back into Sage, you are going to love the GC Pay integration at the end, because with basically a click of a button, all approved payouts, whether it's 1 or 1,000, can import directly back into Sage, saving countless hand keying hours with that. And the last option, so we do have an optional ACH electronic payment solution. I think Marshall will go over it a little bit on the demo. Keep in mind it is optional, but if printing and distribution of paper checks is something that you've been trying to get rid of, our ACH electronic payment system also guarantees receipt of final waiver. So if getting that final waiver is also something you have issues with, the ability to pay your subs quickly electronically and guarantee receipt of that final waiver, it's a pretty good match. Definitely stay tuned for that. And this is just a quote I pulled from one of our current Sage 300 CRE customers. She says, we probably save half a day every day. It's 20 to 25 hours a week where someone on my team doesn't have to be manually entering data. And this is, most customers report something like this. You save so much time by eliminating all those issues on the left. It's incredible how much time you can save and how much better time that can be used in your company rather than just, tedious manual processes. So hope everyone's excited to view the platform, give you a good idea of what you can look forward to. Marshall, I'm going to hand it over to you now to give us a live demo of the platform.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that introduction, Sabrina. And you should be able to see my screen in just a couple seconds. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. And we are going to be jumping into a live presentation of GC Pay in just a moment. And this slide here will largely map out the workflow that we're going to be working through today. And I will be working with the 300 construction and real estate system as the demo set today. However, we do also integrate with 100 Contractor and soon Sage Intacct. And so as you can see from this slide here, we will begin by actually creating a project and linking those contracts from your Sage job cost. The second two items in this workflow really revolve around the schedule of values, and GC Pay really does help facilitate that schedule of values and the agreement on the contract between the general contractor and the sub. After we talk about the schedule of values, we're going to transition over to talking about the actual application for payment. We're going to talk about lien waivers in detail. And then after the sub submits the application for payment, we can automatically import those details into your Sage accounting system, eliminating that need for duplicate data entry. And this portion of the workflow that's currently has a red box around it may happen multiple times over the course of a project. Perhaps a sub is working on the project for 2 months, perhaps it's 2 years. That'll determine how many pay apps they may submit over the course of the project. And then there is one other concept that I'd like to introduce before we jump into the software today, and that's the concept of the payment exchange waiver. And this is the idea that if we utilize the ACH or electronic payment system within GCPay, we can ensure the receipt of the final waiver. So in this scenario, the subcontractor typically does not want to provide a lien waiver until they've received a check. But the general contractor wants to receive the lien waiver before they issue the payment. And so that can create some tension between subcontractors and generals. And so GCPay will utilize the concept of a trust account or an escrow. So the subcontractor can sign the waiver and submit. The general contractor can submit payment. And then once the subcontractor finally receives the payment, the general contractor will receive the waiver. And in the meantime, the general contractor will have access to see the waiver, although it be an unofficial copy. And we will work through this workflow here today. And if you have any questions on this as we go through, again, feel free to participate in the questions section during the live presentation today. And with that introduction, we'll go ahead and jump into a live demonstration of the product here today. And what you are currently looking at is the GCPay website. And what this means is that you can access this solution from anywhere that you have an internet connection and a web browser. So that means you can access this from a cell phone, a desktop, or via a laptop like I am today. And so this will also be the exact same site that you will log into as well as your subcontractors. And so here you can see the login screen for GCPay, and I'm first going to assume the role as the general contractor or as your company, and then we will transition over to the sub side as well today. When we log into GCPay, the first thing I'd like to highlight is we can navigate through the program through these menu options at the top. And the first thing I'd like to do is navigate to my projects. These are my various projects that are synchronized back to my Sage accounting system. And so if I navigate to the Northwest Food Warehouse, we can see some details here. Now, I am going to be utilizing the ACH features today. And so the first thing it's having me do is to assign a bank account. So if you have multiple bank accounts that you may be issuing checks from, you can set each of those up within GCPay for electronic payments. Next, we'll navigate over to project settings. As we're synchronizing with Sage, we are also leveraging the information on those jobs to populate lien waivers. And so if you notice here under the general settings, we have the project name, location, and other details. And so later in the demonstration today, I'm going to show how these values can be dynamically pulled into a lien waiver. And so what that means is that you don't have to prepare lien waivers for your subs don't have to prepare lien waivers for you. They're simply created as a result of going through the application for payment process. The next thing I'd like to mention is users. GCPay is not licensed on the number of users that you have, which means that you can have as many people in your company involved in the approval process for the application for payment. Perhaps you have a compliance officer who's responsible for those insurance documents, or a lien officer in your company who handles all the company's lien waivers. We can set them up with the appropriate role and the appropriate review order to streamline that approval process for the pay apps. Now we'll come back to some project settings later, but the next thing I'd like to talk about is project companies. And this will kind of help you understand how we're going to set your subs up on the GCPay platform. You'll see down below that I went ahead and added a couple subcontractors to my project, but to add them to the project, you simply click Add Company and search against the list right here. Now, this company right here, Barth Electric, is already set up within GCPay. And so one thing that actually surprises a lot of general contractors is just how many of their subs are actually already on GCPay, perhaps, working with other generals in the area. And so this Barth Electric has already been set up in GCPay. But if it is the first time that one of your subs is utilizing GCPay, you can come down and click Send Invitation, and that will initiate the process of getting them onboarded and trained on the solution. We're going to add Barth Electric to the project here today, and I now have 3 different subcontractors. And so I'm going to navigate over to the Integration tab. And this is where we really highlight the integration between your Sage Job Cost and the GCPay solution. If I come over here and click Link Commitment, it's going to show me each of those job cost commitments, think your subcontracts and your purchase orders for this particular project. I'm going to work with a couple different contracts today, and I'm first going to scroll down here for the Ford Metals Company, and I have a structural metal and rebar contract, and this is actually a detailed purchase order for $165,000. So whenever we pull in a commitment from Sage, we will be creating a schedule of values. And we have the ability to create that for our subs, and we also have the ability to have our subs detail out the schedule of values. So for the first example, I'm going to assign this to the Ford Metals Company, and I'm going to click OK. You'll notice that I created a schedule of values here based on the purchase order that's set up within Sage. It's even pulling in my commitment numbers, and looks like those are even cost code numbers as well. But for the next example, I'm going to pull in a lump sum contract. And so this is going to be a contract here for the Barth Electric Company. And when I create a schedule of values for Barth Electric, I'm going to check this box that says to constrain the schedule. And what that means in layman's terms is that we are going to allow Barth Electric to detail out the schedule of values for the contract. And so here you can see this schedule is constrained and is currently being filled out by the sub. We'll be able to do line mapping after the schedule is approved. And so we will be assuming the role of Barth Electric today to fill out that contract. But before we do that, I want to navigate over to compliance. Now, the way we will handle compliance will be that we are going to pull the values directly from Sage. We are going to be looking at accounts payable vendor compliance as well as contract level compliance. So if I look at Barth Electric here, it looks like the umbrella insurance is expired, or at least I show that it expired a couple months ago, but their general liability insurance is still good to go. We're going to click Done here, but you will see that we're going to present those expiration dates to Barth Electric based on what's set up within Sage. Now, we will talk about lien waivers, reports, audit trail, as well as electronic payments, but we need to continue in the workflow today. And the next step in the workflow is to log out of the solution. And we are now going to assume the role as one of your subcontractors, Joe Barth here today. And Joe Barth, as a subcontractor, it's going to look fairly similar to the general contractor view. However, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, I'm logged in as Barth Electric today. Now, I could navigate over to my projects, and you can see each of the projects your sub might be working on, and they may be working with multiple general contractors on these. But we're going to navigate over to the dashboard. And the dashboard is a great place to go to get those items that require your immediate attention. And so you'll see we have some green circles and red circles. The goal here is to have everything be a green 0. And so we'll navigate over to the non-submitted. And if I come down here, I can see a schedule of values for the Barth Electric Company that needs to be submitted. When we open this up, we can see the contract amount as what was displayed within Sage. And looks like this contract here is a refrigeration contract for $76,360. And so when your sub details out this particular item, They could add one line item, or they could add a couple line items, and they could detail this out. Perhaps they want to detail it out, one line for labor and one line for materials, and then they can dictate the prices for each. Alternatively, we will teach them how to use this upload button, and you'll see that we can upload a template. And so if you are currently managing a schedule of values in Excel, or if your subs are, I should say, they can simply upload it right from here. You'll notice that I detailed out my schedule of values into 12 different line items, and I made each of the dollar amounts add up to that $76,000. If I attempted to change a dollar amount, perhaps I put in 5,500 for this line item 5, you'll notice that I am now exceeding my contract amount. And so it will not let me submit that as is. You will need to correct that and have that match the contract amount as the subcontractor. But when we submit the schedule of values, think about this as kind of being onboarding your subcontractors onto a project. And when you onboard a subcontractor to a project, think about the information that might be required. Now, many contractors that I work with, they require a non-disclosure agreement or perhaps a vendor affidavit, something like that. If you don't have it, perhaps you also require a W-9. That might be a document that you require from a sub. And so when you onboard them on and agree to their schedule of values, you can require additional documents, such as a non-disclosure agreement. And so here we can choose a non-disclosure agreement that we'd like to upload, and the sub can sign that and upload it into the system. Now you'll also see that because I'm utilizing electronic payments today, I'm going to need bank account information as well for Barth Electric. So we'll go ahead and click this link here, and it's saying, okay, we have ACH payments turned on for this job. We need to choose a bank account. So if you think right here for a moment, what we're doing with GC Pay is we are having the subs be responsible for managing all of the bank account information. That means that we take the burden off of your company for going out and tracking down those routing numbers and bank account information for your subcontractors. And so now that I've, let me jump back into the application for payment. Now that I've fulfilled the different items that are required, I can go ahead and submit the schedule of values for approval. And I'll go ahead and do that now. Now you'll notice that as the subcontractor, I'm also notified that I have outstanding compliance issues. So I could either click this button here or click on this red tab to see those compliance items that are required from the general contractor. What I'd like to point out is these 4 items are the same 4 items that are being pulled directly from your Sage system. So it is very possible that the subcontractor does have their umbrella insurance up to date. So they can simply upload a copy of that right here within GC Pay, and that can be routed to the appropriate compliance officer on your team. And that's how easy it is to submit a schedule of values as the subcontractor. And so let's go ahead and log back out of the program. Now, what I'd like to do next is I'd like to introduce the slide that we brought up just a few moments ago earlier in the presentation. And at this point in the workflow, we have completed the first 2 blocks in the workflow. We've created a project, linked those contracts, and then we assumed the role of the sub and submitted the schedule of values. Next, we'll assume the role of the general contractor, review and approve that schedule, and then we'll transition onto that application for payment. And so next step in the workflow is to approve the schedule of values. And this will only need to be done once per vendor and per project. And so we'll come over to our dashboard and I'll look under the submitted section, and looks like Barth Electric has submitted a schedule of values. We can come in and review that and see exactly how that was detailed out. And if everything looks good to go, we can review and approve that schedule. Now you'll notice that I just have 1 reviewer for the schedule of values, but you may want to set up multiple reviewers, but I just have 1 set up for today's purposes. All right. And so at this point, that schedule of values has been approved. And so at this point in time, the subcontractor can actually go in and submit their billings because that schedule has been approved. But before we do that, I want to navigate back to the project for just a moment. And I wanted to point out how the change order workflow is going to work within GCPay. You'll notice that after we set up the schedule of values, it says that one of my commitments has failed validation. And the reason for that is that I have submitted a change order on that contract within my Sage system. And so if we click View Commitments here, it'll navigate over to the Integration tab, and you'll see down below that this contract has a change order that's been submitted for $20,000. Now, GCPay and Sage will constantly be syncing or listening to one another, but they'll do a synchronization on an hourly basis. And you can see my last sync was about just under 1 hour ago. And so if I did nothing, this would actually automatically be billable by the subcontractor. So there's nothing that you need to do in order to get this synchronized. But if you'd like to push it through right away, all you need to do is check this box, click Save, and now that this change order is billable by the subcontractor as well. The takeaway here is that your subcontractor will not be able to bill on change orders until they've been submitted in Sage and marked as approved. Alrighty, so before we jump into the application for payment, I want to navigate back to the project settings for just a moment. And if I scroll down here, I want to highlight under the billing options here at the top, we can send a billing reminder a week before the billing due date. So what that means is that if you typically request your subs to submit their billings by the 22nd of each month, then we can send out an email 7 days before that, inviting them to come submit their billings. We can also choose this option, which is to close the month out after billing due date. And what that means is that if a sub submits on the 23rd, we can actually push that to the next month, but we'll leave that unchecked for now. Next, I want to scroll down and talk about lien waivers. And so here you can see where we set up your company's lien waivers. The way that we manage lien waivers is we will take your company's waivers, whether they are conditional, unconditional, final, perhaps you have state-specific waivers or even owner-specific waivers. We will take those into the GCPay platform, and we are going to connect them dynamically to the different values within the GCPay system. So your project names, project location, and dollar amounts will all be filled into the waivers appropriately. You can see here that if I click on the waiver, we can see how it's currently configured. This conditional waiver will be a progress lien waiver, and we will require it along with the application for payment. And so you get to decide when those waivers are received. If you do require notarization on those waivers, we can enforce that under the general options as well. Now, for the unconditional waiver, I am going to be leveraging this concept of payment exchange waiver. And what that means is that if we're using ACH, we can require the waiver before the customer our subs submit their applications for payment. But GCPay will hold it until the payment is received. And so I'm going to highlight how this function works here today. Down below, you can see project compliance, and you can see that we can require compliance details. We can actually disallow submission of a pay app or disallow approval of pay apps as well if subs aren't compliant. All right, without further ado, at this point in the presentation, I'm going to assume the role of the subcontractor, and I'm going to show just how easy it is for your subs to submit their billings into GCPay. And so I'm Joe Barth today, and I received an email that invited me to come submit my billings into GCPay. And so we're going to come here and navigate to the Northwest Food Warehouse, and we're going to come down and create our first application for payment. When we scroll down here, we can see where the retainage percentage was set the application date and what the period is for. And down below is the entry screen where we can submit our billings. If we'd like to type in values as to a dollar amount, you'll notice that if I put $10,000 in this first row, it will automatically calculate the percent complete. Alternatively, if I put in 50% complete under refrigeration labor, it's going to automatically calculate the dollar amount down to the penny. If I tried to overbill a line item, perhaps on this line 5, I put in $5,500, you'll notice that I do not have the ability to overbill the line item. Even if I put in $5,000 and 1 penny, it will not allow me to overbill the line item. If a change does need to be made to the schedule, then they could submit a change order. And you'll notice the change order down below for refrigeration is indeed billable. So perhaps we want to come down here and add, $5,000 to that refrigeration change order. We're empowered to do that. Now, if you allow for the charging of materials stored on a project, perhaps if I put $1,000 in this column here, we can actually trigger additional requirements, such as photos or proof of insurance for those particular customers or subs. Down below, you'll see a nice summary that's doing all of the math for us. You can see the original contract amount, net change orders, showing us our contract to date. We have the work performed minus out retainage to show the sub exactly what they can expect to get paid, as well as the balance to the finish. And as we update the values up above, the calculator down below will update accordingly. When I save those values, you'll notice that with the application for payment, we have some additional items that are required. The first item I want to point out is the stored material backup. So because I put a value into that line item number 3, I am required to upload photos and proof of insurance for that particular item. So I'll go ahead and upload some photos here today, and you'll get to see what those photos look like when we review the pay app in just a few moments. The next thing that is required is a checklist. And now a checklist is a great concept because we can have our subcontractors acknowledge certain items. For example, if the subcontractor has outstanding compliance items, payment will be delayed. And so as the sub, we are acknowledging this statement. And so as I've shown before, they have been warned that those compliance items are not up to date. So that's something that would need to be done before the payment. The next thing I'd like to highlight is the concept of a tiered vendor or third-party suppliers. And oftentimes, a general contractor will require that any contractor, vendor, or supplier that's being funded on the project also submit a lien waiver or other required documentation. In that case, the subcontractor can identify the different suppliers that might be funded on the job, such as Joe Supply. If they add these contractors, they can indicate the contract value, what's due this period, and whether a joint check is going to be required. Alternatively, they can attest that they have no third-party information to report, and we can save the details. If you have questions on how third-party subs work, please do feel free to submit those into the questions section. Finally, we need 2 lien waivers prior to submitting. You'll see we have the conditional as well as the unconditional. For the conditional waiver, we can simply come in here and sign the waiver. And you'll notice that this waiver probably doesn't look like your company's waivers, but what I want to point out is that these items that are bolded are being pulled in dynamically. So your company name, the dollar amount, the project name, location, and dates, and more are automatically pulled into the waiver to prepare that for your subcontractor. Those documents can be digitally signed, and this will count as a legally binding signature that's valid in all 50 states. When we sign the document, we can close that, and it went ahead and accepted that conditional waiver. Now for the unconditional waiver, we can go ahead and sign this document as well. And you'll see here that the payment exchange waiver is required at the time of PayApp submission, but it will be held in a trust. The approver or the general contractor will be given that unofficial copy that can be reviewed prior to releasing payment. And GCPay will only release the copy when the payment is successfully deposited. So this is an unconditional waiver, but as the subcontractor, I can be confident in signing this because otherwise I won't receive my payment. But you'll notice how we put the watermark on it right away to say unofficial copy. And so we will not release that official copy until the payment is received. You'll notice it even has a lock on it here, and it will be locked until that time. And that's how we can handle that concept of a payment exchange waiver. One thing I did not really discuss today is the concept of notarization. And we do have the ability to get those documents notarized at this point in the workflow. And we do have agreement with notarize.com. And so lien waivers can actually be notarized online as well. If you have any questions on that, feel free to submit that as well. Now, when your subs submit the actual application for payment, they can attest that the contract value is current and correct, or perhaps a change order is proposed that's not included in the schedule. They will also confirm the bank account that will be used if you are enabling ACH payments. Now that the PayApp has been submitted, we can now assume the role as the general contractor and begin to go through the review process. For the final time in the presentation today, I'm going to log in as the general contractor. And the final step in the workflow is to navigate to the dashboards and then review the PayApps that have been submitted. When I click review, it brings me right over to the PayApp, and I can see exactly what the sub is billing for on this particular contract in this particular period. We can see those items that have been added, and we can even see the summary down below to see what the sub is expected to get paid. If there are any issues with this pay app, we can click the review button and then reject the pay application. If we reject the pay application, it's going to send it back to the subcontractor, and we can provide a reason as to why it's being rejected. But if everything looks good to go, we can go ahead and approve the pay application. And then right within GCPay, we can release those electronic payments. If you navigate over to the project, we'll navigate now to the ACH tab. And this is where we can release those electronic payments. Under the Payables tab, you'll see each of those applications for payments that have been fully approved, such as the one we've submitted today. By checking this box here, we can go ahead and create a batch of electronic payments and go ahead and click Create. Under the History tab, we can see the status of those payments, and this will also be viewable by the subcontractor. So whether the payment is pending, submitted, escrowed, or released, the subcontractor is going to have visibility into where that payment is in the process. So as it's currently pending, the sub does not need to contact the general because payment is in transit. Now, the final thing that I'd like to show you all today will be the integration back to your Sage accounting system. And in order to show that, I'm going to now introduce the GCPay integration window. And so this is a small piece of software that'll be installed on your local server where your Sage environment is. And this will facilitate that communication between the two platforms. You'll notice under the Projects tab, these are all of my projects that are currently synchronized with GCPay and Sage. If I navigate to the Import tab, this is where you can see each of my approved pay applications. And so I can check off the one that I worked with today, and you can check off one invoice or you can check off multiple. Provide a batch ID, date received, accounting date, and payment date. And then once we've entered those parameters, we can go ahead and click Import to send this into our accounts payable. You'll see in just a moment about how long it takes to send one invoice over. But the takeaway here is that I don't have to double type any of that information into my Sage system. As a result of the subcontractor going through those billings, we will automatically send the details into your Sage accounts payable. It looks like it was indeed successful. And in order to prove the concept here today, I will go ahead and open up Sage Accounts Payable here for my 300 construction and real estate. And the easiest way to show you where that invoice is probably to run an invoice inquiry on the invoice register. And we will be bringing those invoices into Sage as an AP new invoice. So if I navigate to Barth Electric here, you can see the invoice that was brought in today. The date matches today's date. We have the original amount, and the retainage is in there as well. And we can drill into the invoice distribution as well. And we can see the commitment, job, extra, cost code category, as well as the expense account that that invoice is hitting. And I didn't have to type any of these details into the system. All right, and as you're probably aware, there is also an audit trail that has been tracking everything that we've done on the demonstration here today. And so you can also post comments into the audit trail. And we also have a plethora of reports that come right out of the box. And so whether you're looking to download something into Excel and work with it, or perhaps you're looking to print something to PDF, we have lien waiver status reports, outstanding approvals. But one report I always like to show is a monthly cost bundle report. And for some of these reports, we will actually email you a copy of it. And so I'm going to set this for today's month and just go back 1 month. But I'm going to include all those documents there and click email me the report. And so it only takes about 10 or 15 seconds to actually email that. But I do have a copy of a sample monthly cost bundle here on my desktop. So what you can see here is an output of the actual application for payment. And we do provide those G702 and G703 type invoices as a result of the subcontractor going through those billings. So here you can see this one is for commercial carpet. And if I scroll down to the next page, we have the continuation sheet or the G703. If I scroll down again, we have the audit trail or each of those actions that were taken by the sub as well as the general to get that pay app approved. But you'll notice on page number 4, we also include the waivers. And if you have additional documentation such as insurance or W-9s, we'll include that as well. The monthly cost bundle will include applications for each of the subcontractors. So here on page 6, you can see a second app for the Johnson Masonry, along with the audit trail, continuation sheet, and waivers. And so that's just about everything that I had to highlight for you all here within the GCPay platform. And so if you do have questions on anything that was covered, please do feel free to submit that into the questions section, and we'll have contact details up as well. So at this time, I do believe Sabrina has a couple closing slides. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Sabrina.
Thank you, Marshall. I think I just need permission to share. Perfect. Well, first, Marshall, thanks so much for that wonderful demo, really showing the benefits of GCPay for both the general contractor and the subcontractor side of things. Just in review, with GCPay, you'll get that full Sage 300 CRE, Sage 100 contractor integration. We'll pull commitments, change orders, compliance requirements straight from Sage. Then, as Marshall showed in the end, once a pay app is approved in GCPay, it's automatically imported back into Sage, no hand keying whatsoever. It comes with foolproof billing, so subs are unable to make math errors, overbill a line, overbill a contract, bill for any sort of unapproved change orders, or, very important, change the previous billed amounts. Marcia did a great job going over this in detail, the fully managed lien waiver and compliance. So as you saw, we'll handle all compliance requirements and lien waiver exchanges. No more missing lien waivers, both on the conditional and that final. With our optional electronic payment, it does guarantee receipt of final waiver with optional payment exchange feature. You can require, honestly, pretty much any documents you want before pay app submittal. So this ensures that your team will not be chasing down any sort of lien waivers, expired insurance docs, stored material backup, custom documents, anything before the subcontractor can submit a pay app. He did briefly go over this. So GCPay does come with 2 items, digital signature, which is good by UETA guidelines and fully legal as a wet signature in all 50 states, as well as our partnership with notarize.com for online notarization. And then last but not least, GCPay supports both you and your subs 24/7. We have a English and bilingual Spanish speaking support team, true 24/7 via phone or email. So never again will you have to deal with, fielding your subcontractor questions about invoicing. They are trained to contact our team. Let's see here. Oh, any questions? Krista, should we go over any questions that have come up?
Yes, absolutely. We have a couple of questions. First one is, stored material compliance items seem to only highlight photos and insurance. Are the compliance items required for billing stored materials customizable to require particular documents like a bill of sale or itemized inventory?
That's a great question. Yeah, so what Marshall showed, it just asked for proof of insurance and pictures, but that is a fully customizable verbiage, and you can ask for any sort of documents you want, bill of lading, anything you want. It's fully customizable.
Okay, great. Next question is electronic payment optional? If so, can we select which projects and/or subs to turn it on for if we don't want for every project and sub?
Yes. Okay. That's another great question. So it is fully optional. We have plenty of customers today in the system that just pay out of Sage via paper check, like a lot of you are probably doing right now. And if you do want to use our electronic payment with that guaranteed receipt of final waiver, you can decide to turn off and on a project and subcontractor basis. So there's a certain project you do or do not want it on. It's just a tick of a box. Same thing with a subcontractor. If you know that, a certain sub does not want to be paid or won't be paid via ACH, you can just tick it off for them and pay them via paper check or vice versa. It's really customizable.
Okay, the next question is, if we're implementing Procore, would GCPay be redundant?
No. So, and I guess I would need a little bit more information, but Procore as like a project management tool, I think about half of our current customers use GCPay with Procore. With GCPay, you'll get the full, subcontractor billing, everything with the compliance, lien waivers, change orders, tiered vendor tracking that Procore does not offer.
Okay, next question is, what about lien releases for a subcontractor that has a lower tier and this lower tier has a lower tier?
That's a great question. And so in the liabilities tab that Marshall showed, it says tiered contractors, and that can be second, third, or even fourth tier. It's just any tiered vendors underneath the subcontractor. So you can use it to track, we'll send lien waivers to anyone on that list. It doesn't matter which tier they are.
Okay, one final question is, do the general contractors need to train the subs on how to use GCPay, or is there some sort of training provided?
Another great question. So the general contractor will be assigned their own onboarding manager within GCPay, and this onboarding manager will train the general contractor's full, admin, accounting, PMs, but we will also train every single subcontractor. And then, like I mentioned, it comes with 24/7 support for both general contractor and sub, but the general contractor does not have to worry at all about training the sub. That is fully on our training team.
Okay, great. That's all the questions we have.
Perfect.
So thank you again for everyone for attending today's webinar. The recording will be sent out shortly, as well as your Grubhub certificates for attending today. And if you have any follow-up questions, just feel free to reply to the email and we'll be happy to answer them for you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.